In mid-May 1940, in northern France, the elite French 1st DCR, France's best armored division, sat refueling in perfect rows. 150 tanks, including massive Char B1s with armor no German gun could penetrate. Fuel trucks stood parked between them, hoses still connected, engines off. Then came the explosions. Fuel trucks detonated into fireballs. Commanders screamed orders, but no one knew where the fire was coming from. Crews scrambled for tanks that wouldn't start, fuel hoses still attached. The Char B1s spun helplessly in place, tracks blown off, as enemy tanks materialized from nowhere, circling, striking, vanishing into smoke. By dusk, 2/3 of the 1st DCR lay burning. The French survivors couldn't explain what had hit them. Neither could the German High Command. Operating completely off the map, more than 50 miles beyond any known position, this was the Gespensterdivision, the Ghost Division. In the spring of 1940, as Germany prepared to strike west, the Wehrmacht massed 135 divisions set to break through the frontier. Though most of these long columns of infantry and horse-drawn wagons moved at the pace of a march, among them were only 10 new panzer divisions. These armored spearheads, built around tanks with their advance sharpened by motorized infantry, artillery, and engineers, were designed not to grind forward slowly, but to punch a hole, race through, and tear an enemy apart before he even knew what hit him. The Wehrmacht did not grant command at these precious divisions lightly, which is why when officials announced in February 1940 that outsider Erwin Rommel would lead the 7th Panzer Division, the decision couldn't have been more shocking. The 48-year-old had no previous experience leading a division. He even lacked any first-hand experience with the new Lightning War tactics that had already shocked the world with their earth-shattering efficiency during Poland's conquest in the fall of 1939. He hadn't even led a combat unit during that invasion. What Rommel possessed, however, was direct access to Adolf Hitler. He'd first crossed paths with the Fuhrer in 1934 during a staged political gathering, where he also met propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, making a great impression on both. Around that time, he released the book Infanterie greift an, a thorough study from his days as a young infantry officer on the Western Front during the Great War, filled with military tactics that became a great hit. Drawn into the Fuhrer's orbit, the pair clicked due to their shared modest background and disdain for the aloof Prussian officer class, which dominated the Wehrmacht leadership. From there, Rommel rapidly climbed the rank ladder, first as an instructor, then as commander of Hitler's escort battalion during the Sudetenland and Czechoslovak occupation. And now, he stood ready to guide a panzer division through the Belgian Ardennes forests in May. Formed in 1939, the 7th Panzer Division fielded 218 tanks organized into 3 battalions, backed by 2 rifle regiments, a motorcycle battalion, engineers, and anti-tank units, totaling roughly 15,000 men. Though it had not yet seen major action, now with its new leader, it was clear to everyone that the division would be receiving the highest level of political attention and preference, a display piece of the Nazi regime. Before dawn on May 10, 1940, the 7th Panzer Division rolled across the Belgian frontier near Saint-Vith. To its right, the 5th Panzer Division kept pace. Their objective lay 65 miles west, the Meuse crossings at Dinant. Above them, Messerschmitt fighters cut through the gray sky protecting them. However, the ground in the first hours felt almost empty. Most of the Belgian army was waiting further north, committed to defending the open plains and the great cities. Already, French and British reinforcements were rushing east to meet them, convinced the German blow would fall there. Back in the Ardennes, while their defenders had demolished bridges and blocked roads, few men stayed to fight over them. Throughout the day, German engineers cleared the wreckage or swung the columns onto back roads, pushing forward until the infantry encountered the enemy for the first time the following morning, when Rommel's men fought with defenders at the village of Chabrey. Holding this sector was the French 9th Army, commanded by General André Corap, a veteran of colonial service in North Africa, whose force of 9 divisions was dangerously overstretched across 50 miles of winding river valleys. Though these isolated outposts tried to resist, against the sheer speed of the German armor, the defenders were pulled aside almost instantly. By sunset on May 11th, the 7th Panzer had covered nearly 40 miles. What Allied planners had estimated would take a week of fighting, Rommel's division had accomplished in 48 hours. On May 12th, when Rommel's panzers finally reached Dinant after 2 days of racing through the forest, they found exactly what they feared. Every bridge across the Meuse River lay in ruins. With the river running deep and fast between fortified banks, fresh French reinforcements dug in on the western shore, waiting for their arrival. The defenders had calculated they had 5 days to prepare, not 2. Well before sunrise on May 13th, German infantry hauled inflatable rubber boats to the water's edge, with the first few men paddling into the current just past 3 in the morning. French machine guns opened fire immediately. The first wave took devastating casualties, leaving wounded Germans stranded on the far bank with no way to evacuate them. Knowing his men were pinned under fire, Rommel ordered troops to torch every house along the riverbank. As flames roared up and pungent, eye-watering black smoke billowed across the water, more German boats began launching under the burning curtain. The French 18th Division, defending this sector, had just forced marched 50 miles to the area and arrived so exhausted that their commander wouldn't learn the Germans had crossed until 7 a.m., hours too late. By then, though some Germans had a toehold on the far bank, every single boat was destroyed. Just when failure seemed imminent, German tanks and artillery rolled up to the eastern shore. Finally, under their thundering cover fire, engineers launched fresh boats. As French tanks rumbled toward the tiny bridgehead, knowing they had no anti-tank guns, as the boats couldn't carry them, Rommel ordered his men to blast the vision slits with everything they had. Believing they faced anti-tank guns, the French tanks ground into reverse and vanished into the smoke. By morning on May 14th, the advance guard reached Ohain, a village 2 miles west of Dinant. When Colonel Georg von Bismarck radioed that he had arrived, static warped the transmission, and headquarters heard only one word: encircled. Panic swept up the train of command, and General Gunther von Kluge declared an Ohain crisis, diverting entire divisions to rescue von Bismarck. Further back with the main division, though unsure of this so-called crisis, Rommel didn't wait for clarification. Crisis or not, he was determined to be closer to his men, more now than ever before. The leader then assembled every tank on the western bank and raced towards Ohain himself. By evening, as he and his panzers punched through to von Bismarck, he realized the futility of his efforts. However, now, all 3 German panzer corps had bridgeheads across the Meuse. The following day, May 15th, General Corap, the Frenchman responsible for the sector between the Ardennes and the Meuse, ordered his men to retreat westward. The withdrawal collapsed into chaos as German tanks surged through a 60-mile gap in the French line, flooding into open country with absolutely nothing left in their path. Rommel's panzers, with Stuka dive bombers screaming overhead, tore right into the rear of the elite 1st Armored Division, one of France's best, with 150 tanks, including massive Char B1s with ammo no German gun could penetrate. However, as Rommel's lead tanks crested a hill, they found the entire French division refueling. Though the French crews scrambled to disconnect hoses, start engines, and traverse turrets, it was too little too late. The German tanks fanned out across the fields, firing on the move at such close range that even their smaller guns could tear into the flanks of the French armor, leaving the massive machines destroyed where they last stood. By morning, only 17 tanks remained out of 150. To top it off, while Flavion burned, Rommel's other column smashed through the 4th North African Division at Ohain, shattering 2 of France's best formations in a single day. By May 16th, the division reached Avesnes-sur-Helpe, where the plan called for stopping and awaiting further orders. The French frontier lay ahead, what the Germans called the Maginot Line extension, but in reality, it was only scattered pillboxes and tank traps. High Command wanted a careful, deliberate assault. Rommel had been held back at divisional headquarters all morning. At 9:30 a.m., he finally received permission to return to his units. When General Gunther von Kluge arrived and found the attack still stalled, Rommel outlined his plan and got approval. By sunset, they were rolling into open country. Riding at the spearhead, Rommel pushed on through the night. The panzers moved without headlights, navigating by moonlight, making French units scatter in panic. In the middle of the night, radio contact with Corps headquarters was lost. Though official orders were to halt and consolidate at Avesnes, Rommel saw the French in full retreat and the road ahead wide open. All through the night, the division moved so fast, French reports placed it in 3 different locations at once. Even the German High Command had lost track of its own division. At dawn on May 17th, Rommel's lead elements reached a hill east of Le Chateau, 50 miles from where they'd started the night before. Though Rommel's men were exhausted and could barely keep their eyes open, they knew they'd just pulled off what historian Alistair Horn would call, quote, the most remarkable German exploit of the day, possibly of the entire campaign. The speed and audacity of it all, appearing from nowhere, vanishing into the night, striking 50 miles behind enemy lines, earned the 7th Panzer a new nickname, the Ghost Division. Following a brief pause, on May 18th, orders came to take Cambrai, a key crossroads 15 miles west. The Panzer crews were exhausted, engines overheating, tracks breaking apart. Still, Rommel would not wait. He scraped together whatever could still move and roared toward Cambrai. Firing wildly and throwing up dust clouds, the column looked larger than it was. The French defenders, already demoralized by reports of German breakthroughs, abandoned the town without a fight. May 19th was spent refueling and rearming. The men were running on 2 hours of sleep a night, and even Corps Commander Hott wanted to halt. Rommel pressed on instead, hearing reports of British units digging in near Arras. That night, his tanks rolled toward Borain, just south of the city. Once again, the spearhead moved faster than its support. But this time the danger came not from Rommel's impatience, but from the enemy. French cavalry tanks had infiltrated through the gaps and were prowling behind German lines. Rommel turned back to reconnect with his infantry and blundered into the threat. French fire tore through his escort. Several of his vehicles went up in flames, and for hours, Rommel and his staff were isolated, nearly surrounded. Only by dawn on May 20th had the division reassembled. On his left flank, the SS Totenkopf division was in position, and that evening, news arrived that Guderian's panzers had reached the Channel. 250,000 Allied soldiers were now trapped in northern France. The campaign seemed all but won. Yet the Ghost Division was stretched dangerously thin, scattered across 50 miles of French countryside, just like its opponents only days before, running on fumes and held together by momentum alone. By mid-May, Britain's Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, had been in office less than 2 weeks. Nevertheless, upon hearing about the seemingly unstoppable Germans, he instinctively recognized there was an opportunity, and the leader's representative reached British headquarters in France, demanding an immediate counterattack. The British commanders on the ground knew it was desperate. After all they could scrape together was just 74 tanks, most of them obsolete Mark I models with tracks ready to fall apart. The French could add 60 more tanks. The supposed British counterattack at Arras was thrown together in a rush, and so it went in with a major flaw. According to historian George Forty, it, quote, suffered from a complete lack of air support, had little artillery support, no infantry or tank radio communications. The units had never operated together before meeting in the concentration area, and worst of all, had left in such a hurry that proper orders had never been passed down to individual tank commanders. Still, Churchill insisted. Something had to be done. On May 21st, Rommel ordered his panzers to swing northwest of Arras toward Lille. Everything was going according to plan until he realized his infantry had fallen behind again, and he had no choice but to double back to find them. While on the road back, Rommel found German troops in full retreat from the village of Vailly. Now British tanks, the attack he had dismissed, were pouring into the village from 2 different directions, machine gun fire raking the streets, while German infantry ran past their own anti-tank guns, abandoning positions terrified. Without thinking twice, Rommel jumped from his vehicle. With his aide, Joachim Most, beside him, he grabbed fleeing gun crews by their collars, physically dragging them back to their weapons. Under Rommel's direct and fearless command, they started firing, from anti-tank guns, anti-aircraft guns, anything that could shoot. By evening, the village was destroyed beyond belief. Burning tanks littered every street. The Ghost Division had lost 89 men, 116 wounded, 173 missing, 4 times their casualties from crossing the Meuse. 30 panzers destroyed. The British lost 42 of their 74 tanks. Rommel had stopped the attack, but barely. For the first time since crossing into France, the British had shown the Ghost Division could bleed. Though the attack certainly slowed the division, it didn't stop them from traveling north. In the days after Arras, Rommel pushed his division north, forcing a crossing of the La Bassée Canal west of Lens. On May 26th, he was handed temporary command of the 5th Panzer Division's tanks for the assault on Lille, where 4 French divisions had dug in for a last stand. Between May 27th and June 1st, he directed the siege until 40,000 French troops finally surrendered. With the division paused to refit, Rommel was summoned to Hitler's headquarters on June 2nd. Writing to his wife the next day, he noted that among all the divisional commanders present, he alone had been chosen to accompany the Führer during the meeting. When operations resumed on June 5th, the 7th Panzer tore through what remained of French resistance. The best French troops were gone, and the British evacuated at Dunkirk. What followed was less a battle than a mad dash across France. Rommel's division took Rouen on June 8th, Saint-Valery on the 11th, and Cherbourg on the 18th. French units surrendered faster than the Germans could process them. By June 25th, when the armistice took effect, the Ghost Division had driven to within 200 miles of Spain. In the span of just 6 weeks, the 7th Panzer Division had captured 97,648 prisoners, destroyed or seized 458 tanks, 277 field guns, 64 anti-tank guns, and over 4,000 trucks. However, they also paid the highest price of any German Panzer Division: 2,500 casualties and 42 tanks destroyed. Walking home from Rennes on June 21st, Rommel called this incredible campaign, quote, a lightning tour of France. The campaign would go down as one of the most complete military victories in modern history, with the Ghost Division at its spearhead. In a letter dated December 20th, 1940, Hitler told Rommel, quote, "You can be proud of your achievements." Following his exploits, Rommel spent the better part of summer 1940 helping Goebbels produce the propaganda film Victory in the West. Arras, the sole moment in 6 weeks when the Allies had actually struck back, was the only Allied offensive that made the final cut. During this time, the Wehrmacht also prepared for Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. But when the Luftwaffe couldn't secure air superiority over the Channel, the invasion was scrapped. By early 1941, Rommel's time with the Ghost Division was over. Promoted to Lieutenant General, he shipped out to North Africa to command the Africa Corps. His mission was to stop the British advance across Libya and save Italy's collapsing desert position. There, in the Sahara, racing across sand instead of the French countryside, he earned the nickname that would stick forever: the Desert Fox. After Rommel left in early 1941, command of the 7th Panzer Division passed briefly to Hans von Funk. By June, the Ghost Division had been shifted east and assigned to Army Group Center for Hitler's new gamble, Operation Barbarossa. From then on, the Ghost Division's fate would mirror that of the entire Wehrmacht, from unstoppable force to grinding destruction. In June 1941, the 7th Panzer crossed into the Soviet Union as part of Operation Barbarossa. The same speed that had shattered France now tore through Belarus. At Minsk and Vyazma, the division's tanks slammed shut pockets, trapping hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops. By October, they were racing toward Moscow. Then winter came. Engines froze solid at 40 below. Tanks that had rolled through France without stopping were abandoned in snowdrifts. When the Red Army counterattacked in December, the Ghost Division barely escaped annihilation, its crews fleeing on foot through blizzards. Rebuilt in 1942, the division briefly recaptured its old glory at Kharkov, encircling entire Soviet armies. That summer, it drove toward the Caucasus oil fields, sweeping across the steppe as it had across France. But by year's end, with the Wehrmacht dying at Stalingrad, the 7th Panzer was desperately holding the line along the Don River. At Kursk in July 1943, the Ghost Division met its match. Instead of racing 50 miles in a night, it measured progress in yards against walls of Soviet anti-tank guns. Within a week, the offensive died. From there, the division would never attack again. From Ukraine to Poland to Pomerania, each withdrawal cost more tanks and men than could be replaced, and they became outnumbered 3-1. On May 8, 1945, the survivors surrendered to British troops near Schwerin, ironically, not far from where their glory had begun 5 years earlier. Of the 15,000 men who had crossed into France with Rommel, barely 1,000 remained. With this, the Ghost Division finally vanished forever.